So, Agnes.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm going to talk, and I believe some of you may have heard my colleague Greet Vermeulen. She talked about work-life balance, and she used the same data set. I'm going to look more at the issue around job, are working conditions improving? And then something around job quality, but then what else? So somehow the limits of an objective approach to measuring job quality. I'm an economist by training, but I stopped believing in economics a long time ago, or working only in economics. So that's probably, I can see some faces. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the European Working Conditions Survey, I work for Eurofound, which is just down in Loughlinstown, and we would welcome stagiaires, Irish stagiaires. We don't have many, so just for you to know. Eurofound is the European Agency for the Improvement of Living and Working Conditions, and we started in 1991 by chance. There was some budget left at the end of the year, a survey for measuring working conditions. When it started in 91, the challenge was to be able to put a number on working conditions. And that challenge to some extent still remains, because it's not quite easy to put a number and to know what that number means. 40% in work intensity, what does it mean? If you compare it to 30 or 50. And to know what type of relationship, we need to look at and why. So it's still, a lot of work in progress. In the meantime, many countries started to develop a type of a working conditions survey, and probably the two most equipped countries are Finland, which recently launched its 9th working conditions survey, so they have 50 years of working conditions, which is quite interesting, and France. And France has a whole series of working condition survey which are embedded into one another, because the moment you start to go away from just employment and you start to look at work, you open up many different boxes, and it's quite interesting to then try to close them. So we started in 1991 with only 12 member states, and now we are doing the fieldwork for the 6th, and we will have a sample size of 43,100. That's the target, and we'll see what is the achieved sample size at the end. And it will cover 35 countries. So it's increased, in terms of country coverage, in terms of sample size, and in terms of questionnaire. It started with something like 20 questions, and now it's, as part of a Eurobarometer, and now it's a full standing survey of 50 minutes. So, we've tried to learn and adapt to the challenges. We're also working with other countries who are countries not European, who want to develop some type of instruments to measure working conditions and to have some possibilities for benchmarking and learning. So, for example, there's South Korea, and they have done the European Working Conditions Survey questionnaire 4 times already. They do it every year with a sample size of 30,000, so huge. And it's quite interesting. They took the same questionnaire, and when we looked at the answer, they're very similar to the EU 15 average. And later on next year, we're going to do more serious comparative analysis, because it will be interesting to try to add up to the size of, globalization from a working conditions perspective. The US, the Rand Foundation just got money to do 85% of the European Working Conditions Survey, but it's going to be a different methodology. They're using some type of a web panel. They argue it's going to be nationally representative. We'll see. But again, it's interesting that, they are interested in measuring work, and they've realized that work is, much more than the earnings you get and the number of hours that you work, and that other dimensions matter. At the moment, I'm working with China, thanks to the ILO, and they want to take, they have in China the official LFS, and very few people can access the official LFS. And then there's a kind of a ad hoc LFS, which is done by CAS, which is the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. And they are doing it in 14 municipalities. So the municipalities decide to get this LFS bis. And we're developing a model with them so that they would add to those, they've identified for the LFS who are working questions about job quality, defined from an objective perspective. I'll mention it. So that's work in progress. I'm not sure. They have the money, and they say they want to do it, but I'm not sure. And they say if they want to do it, they'll do it in October, but I'm not sure what exactly will they do, and will we get access to the data set. But they're very interested by the benchmarking towards job quality, and another topic which is learning organizations, on which we have fixed. Then we've also been working with Brazil, who is reforming their official systems and statistics, and they've realized that, again, if you want to have a comprehensive system that allows you to plan for the challenges and document what is important for your country so that you can design policy or address policy dilemma, a working condition survey type would be interesting. So that's our little part. Prior to that, we did some experiments again with the ILO. And we extracted from the working condition survey what we thought were key questions on job quality, and they run them in surveys in islands. They did it in islands because that's where they got the money, and because to some extent, we wanted to test to what extent, the models that we have to explain working conditions, like Karasek, Sigrist, and, all of that, we could get similar results in a very different environment. So we've done it in Tanzania, Mozambique, Jamaica, and Zanzibar. Unfortunately, we couldn't do any fieldwork visits there, which would have been quite nice. But it seems to show that there is some relevance to our model, and we can apply and get answers that seems to be somehow valid and make sense, and the indicators behave the way they're supposed to behave. So I'm going to talk about results from the 2010 editions, which was covering 34 countries. And the working condition survey is a survey of workers. So workers are defined according to the LFS. So it's people who, during the reference week, have performed at least 1 hour of work for monetary or non-monetary remuneration. This non-monetary is quite complicated because every time we get question about I've minded the cat, in exchange for a meal, is that person a worker or not a worker? And then, what do we do with their answers, because they're, more casual worker than anything else. But politically, for the European Commission, and it's important to be able to measure working conditions, in casual employment or people who have a weak labor market attachment and have some idea of what type of work. We do face-to-face interviews. Maybe at some stage we'll have to change, mostly for monetary budget reasons. But it still, is a very good way, to get valid answers from respondents. We do the interviews at people's homes and never in companies' premises. That's something which has been, examined a number of times. If you ask this working conditions questionnaire in a company, you get slightly different answers. So that's our interest is trying to get the and really the behaviors and the personal experiences rather than opinions, from workers. So the way we phrase the question is to try to be very objective. And there are only a few issues which are more subjective, so to say. Some of them like work intensity, because, not even an external observer could measure what is really the work intensity for somebody. Issues which are a bit complicated, that's really an understatement. Very hard to measure are issues around violence, because according to the countries, what people qualify as violence at work, which happens, and humiliating behavior can be quite different, and what you would say to an interviewer is also different. So our experience is that, for this is to multiply the number of questions so that then, hopefully we have a latent variable, which is, making sense. And when we look at them in the Logit or whatever, the models, they work the way they should work, but we don't think that the levels that we are measuring, the incidence, is really the incidence. We're sure that those who say they have been exposed to violence and bullying have been exposed, but whether there are many people who haven't said, that's probably the case. But that's, the strategy, and this is important. We have an explicit commitment to gender mainstreaming, but that's really, really hard. I can, elaborate on that more. But basically, it means that in terms of the analysis, the indicators, and the way we analyze, we're trying to integrate gender all across that. Because circumstances and, labor market segregations and, are very different. It's a highly comparable survey. It's the same questionnaire. We do spend a lot of time on translations and, all of that. And the methodology is the same, but the sampling, we try to find the best sampling strategy in each of the country, which is the way. So that's, what the European Working Conditions Survey was made. First, put a number, and employed, self-employed, casual employment, not casual employment. Understand how working conditions cluster together, and there's more and more debate about risk versus resources. So looking at this issue of maybe the balance or, the interactions, the trade-offs, this type of issues. Identify group of risk and issues of concern as well as of progress, but this is part of a Eurofound. We're there to improve working conditions, so that's a logical thing. It means that we have to work on trend, which is quite complicated, and contribute to European policy development on quality of work and employment issues. And I think we're doing quite well. We have what we call policy impact, and we're doing quite a lot. And the European Working Conditions Survey is the only source at European level which allow you to have something, on quality of work and employment, because the LFS, is too limited. Yet, there are some weaknesses to the European Working Conditions Survey, the fact that it's every 5 years, and the fact that it has a rather limited sample size. But in a way, that's what European taxpayers pay for, and that's probably reflect some of their priorities and choice. So a couple of things descriptive, just to give you an idea of, working conditions. Are they changing? Which way? And some challenges, and then something on the job quality. So what are working conditions first? There's the result of an interaction between a worker performing a job in a certain company, in a certain labor market, institutional environment. it's not about the task that the people are doing, it's about the characteristic of the work. And the challenge is to find a framework to describe these characteristics of work which is relevant for the worker of somebody working as a cashier or working in a plant or working as a consultant, and that's why we have to talk to a somehow abstract level, and we talk a lot about the rhythm of work, the autonomy, and all this type of issues. So the first thing, and that one is quite, it's this is descriptive, but it's most of the changes here are significant. When you read things about what will work be, everybody in the 70s and 90s, everybody said, well, there'll be new technologies and, there'll be no more physical hardness or, hardship or, in work. And what our results show is that actually this is still, despite new technology, despite improvement, despite changes in the labor force, a lot of the work remain physical. And the work which is physical is not only work in agriculture or industry, but a lot of the work in the service industry is quite physical. These things about the cashier, the ergonomic studies which show that they carry the weight of an elephant, I think every day, or something like this, and they do it in a movement which is very uncomfortable. And MSDs, if you look at people in Zara or the clothes shop, with short production time for the different lines, they do much more work of going to stocks, putting things up, going down because they don't have the size, and their work has become more physical. So even in service industry, work remains physical. Sometimes the changes in the market have somehow, or management have led it. Another important driver is all that is under work intensification. And if you have to work faster and do more things, you will not do them the proper way, in most cases. You will not, working faster is not always working smart. And that means that some of the instruments that are available for you to do your work, you will not use. So you see that, for example, in studies about in hospitals, that people have all the machine to lift the patients, give them a bath and whatever. When, they have to, there are less nurses, or, they have, more beds to deal with, they just don't do that. And it's the orderlies, call a colleague, they carry on their back the person, they wash them, and they bring them back. So that's, becoming more physical. So that's, the reason why these two things, which are quite annoying, are increasing over time. And these other things, remain more or less the same. So work still has a physical dimension to it. Evolution of weekly working hours, where I think Ireland has, you've seen it in Ireland. But what we observe, which is quite common, is overtime, the dispersion is increasing. So when you talk about average, it means less and less something meaningful. And that there are less and less people working longer hours, and there are more and more people working part-time. Different evolutions in different countries, because part-time was illegal for a number of countries, before. And in France, we've now limited the part-time to 24 hours. So it's only if there's a special collective agreement that people can have a very short part-time, because it's not very sustainable over the long term. So all this is to be, you need to apply some type of legislation, but that's the message.
Is this contracted hours or
it's
actual number of hours reported?
Actual number of hours reported over the last 12 months. This slide, sorry, we have a new template for this year because it's a 40 years and it collapsed. So you can't see it. So this is the issue of work intensification, which I've mentioned. We have 14 indicators to measure or to try to capture work intensification because it can be presented in different ways. Some of them are subjective and some are more objective. So the objective ones have to do with the number of pace determinants. And this one is one of the subjectives, but overall they all go in the same direction, which is there's been work intensification has happened in Europe. What you don't see here is that it's kind of level off in 2010. And the hypothesis is that for 2015, work intensification will be back increasing again. That's what has been observed in many other European countries through their national survey, and that's what expected with after all the laid off, you have the survivors, different work organization, maybe more work, or certainly a different one, so it should have an increase. We will see. What is interesting is that the kind of wave of work intensification per countries haven't happened at the same time. There were, and in the new member states, they happened somehow later than in the so-called old member states. But that's a very important phenomenon. This is about some trends in creative work and task variation, and this is quite interesting to see. For example, this, which is significant, that the proportion of people who say they are learning new things hasn't been increased. So it's true that we have a more educated workforce, so that's probably part of the story. But it's quite worrying that there's another side of the story, which is that probably we haven't changed the way we organize and we design jobs, as much as we wanted. And if you look at it from a more work organization perspective, I think, I have it here, then you see that, so that's a bit like working time. Average, is just an average, and you may have different things, different. So the average may at the end not represent what it is. What is really happening. So this is a study that we've done. We've looked at, I think it was 28 variables, which somehow relate to the work organization and the HRM practices. And then we've done multiple correspondence analysis to see how would they cluster together. The way they cluster means, they were very close to the theory, and we could have 4 types of work organization and HRM together, some which are close to learning organizations, Zarifian, if you know, some which are close to lean productions, some Tayloristic and some simple. So in this too, you have quite a lot of learning components, high level of learning components through the job, through access to some formal and informal training, and through the experience of teamwork and task rotation. This one, you have very high level of pace determinants, and this one is really simple. It's not very sophisticated at all. And what we did, we did this analysis first in 2000, and we looked at what type of job quality was associated, in this, work organization type. And this is the best job quality associated with learning, and lean not so much because of the high level of intensification. Tayloristic, as we know, is not great, and simple. What's interesting to see is that, with all the emphasis that we've put on lifelong learning, having a skilled workforce, globalization, and the push to competitivity and all of that, we would hope that these two would be increasing, but this one, policies might have, managed to influence it. And what we see is that actually learning organizations are decreasing. The proportion of people who work in a type of work organization which is learning and with a good job quality, is decreasing, and this one is increasing. What's interesting in terms of who in jobs, who in sectors is there, is that, whatever, even if you're a low-skilled worker, ISCO 8 or 9, or, in all sectors are present there. So it's not the sectors that determine exclusively that it's a strong determinant, or, but it's not only that. So yes, indeed, Lean started in automotive, and there are still, the majority of organizations in the automotive sector are Lean. Here you have a lot in financial intermediation or whatever, but you also have, sectors which don't use a lot of high-skilled people or, low-skilled people anywhere else. So, there is hope for everybody. It's not only for the skilled and very, workers who are on the competitive end of the labor market. So that was about some changes. And one issue is at the European level is what is job quality and is it improving or not? Because when you have things like I've done, one by one, it's very hard to know, what is the global direction. So what we did is we've worked with Francis Green to try to measure, to put a number on job quality. And what we decided, first of all, we knew, it was kind of a presupposé or something we've learned over time, that job quality had to be multidimensional, because if you look at all the different disciplines, they have different things, which matter, and, that's very obvious. What was most difficult was I think was another thing which was quite easy was to decide to separate the level of, the attributes of a job and the attributes of a worker, because it's very hard. We always know people who, do a job which doesn't look very good, who are very happy doing their work, or people who do a job that a lot of people would judge, as being very gratifying and very good, who are not happy with it, who are not satisfied. So this part, the subjective part is quite difficult to deal with. So what we decided is let's separate the individual from the job and the work that they do, and then to assess the quality of the job that people do, we will take an objective approach. And this objective approach, we took it from epidemiological studies, and we looked at studies on cohort, prospective studies, which have shown, clearly that being exposed to this had a relationship on health and well-being, either positive or negative. So we did this review of the literature. We had all the factors that we thought would come into the common pot. Then we looked into the epidemiological literature so that we would find the one which had a proven effect on health, on well-being, with a very strong methodology. And then we reaggregated, we put them in the, we looked at the indicators, and we looked at whether they were making homogeneous scales together to measure this. So at the end, and part of it is, it's still not perfect. Some of the things that we've done, we will repeat the analysis with the 2015 data, and we will change because our measurement is not very good quality, or because we've identified items which are important. So, or we've had a little problem with how to deal with the working hours and all of that. But at the end, we've measured the quality of the job. So we've taken everything like work-life balance, which would be a property of the individual, depending on their circumstances, individual or, as constructed. And, we've looked at the epidemiology to set up. So we have 4 dimensions that constitute job quality. There's earnings, and in earnings, it's both the level of earnings and, the literature would suggest the fairness of earning. We didn't have that in the survey, so we couldn't measure it. And our data on earnings, it can be improved. So hopefully this time they'll be a little bit better, but it's not. It's far from being very good. But still it says something. And prospects. So it's prospects associated with the job rather than prospects, linked to your own employability and the type of labor market you are in. So it's things around career prospects. We've had loads of discussion about the type of contract. So the question was whether, having a permanent contract would give you more prospects than, having a temporary contract. That's, that can be argued each way. At the end, we decided, okay, if you have a permanent contract, that gives you more prospects to the job. But it's true that in many countries, it's very easy to lay off somebody on a permanent contract. And even in some countries, somebody on a fixed-term contract can have a higher level of protection than on a permanent contract. So that's, a choice that we've made. But what is true from an epidemiological perspective is that the level of job insecurity, is a health hazard. And, that's not something that people strive in, insecurity, is not very good for you. Working time quality. So in that one, we looked at things around the duration of working hours. And this is one, again, where we've made a choice and, we are still wondering whether it was the best choice. What we know from, on the point of duration, is that if you work long hours, that's not good for your health, over time. So does that mean that when you work short hours, this is good for your health? There are very few studies about that. We've introduced, some type of, we've given a lower weight to the people who work shorter hours and higher for those who work, well, not the people, but the jobs with that. I'm not sure, and then we had the total level of earnings, so it was consistent, but I'm still, I think, saying you work low hours, that's good job quality, I'm not quite sure. So I think not working long hours, that's not good for job quality. This I can say, but the opposite, I think that's, there were a lot of discussion and, I would probably, we're probably going to change it. The other issues that we included are around what used to be called asocial working hours and flexible working hours. So it's around night work, shift work, and weekend work. These, there are plenty of epidemiological studies that show they're not good, although on shift work it depends the way it's organized. Flexibility, there are things that show that employee-led flexibility is quite good for your health. So we have, some of this. So we have, that's how we've populated this one. This one is probably the most complicated. There are 4 dimensions, and at the moment we weighted them all into one index. But actually, when we were trying to work with the index, we realized, especially in the case of women, that the trade-offs are different. So I'm not sure that was the most clever things. We were trying to synthesize, an awful lot of information in the minimum things, and maybe, we've synthesized it all, and that's something which we need to look at. It's complicated on this to know how much more what the gain and what type of weighting should you use and on which basis, is it just a decision of the research or is it something more empirical? But then it depends, other ways it may be different. So this is a big, long discussion. But,
how do you decide the weights?
Well,
it's a researcher, isn't it?
On this one, where we were very involved in this. On this, we gave equal weights to each of them because we couldn't think of a better other solution rather than this arbitrary one.
Well, if you had earnings data, you could do it properly, right? So
Well,
you could estimate compensating differentials.
We'll come to the earnings. You'll see what type of results it gives. Because I don't think it really works earnings differential. But so we had 4 dimensions that come in the literature. Skill, use, and discretion. So that's a lot about Karasek, and it's the idea that we all have skills, and we all know what is the best way to do our work that fit us, and so we need a little bit of autonomy. So all the things that allow people to use their skills, develop their skills, and have a bit of autonomy, that's good. We've had, because we've had some discussion about the type of technology, would that be included? And then we don't have that much on technology, so, it's difficult, how to, and there's probably room for improving that more. Social environment, so there are things that are good for your health, like having a good manager, having social support from your colleagues, and on the opposite, being bullied, exposed to violence, this type of thing, they're not good. So that's, that was easy to populate. Physical environment, again, it was an issue about, is exposure a bad thing in itself, or is exposure with information? Or, so we could have defined it a different way. At the end, we looked at the data, and it seems like whether you're protected, informed, if you're exposed to physical risk, that's, not very good for your health. So that's how we've put it in. And work intensity, so we have 14 indicators, and we've used them. In terms of their relationship with well-being, in a way that's partly it's a circular arrangement and partly it's not. Partly it's circular because we've selected the indicators because we knew they would have an effect, positive or negative, on health. It's not fully circular. Well, it's not circular because what is the job and what is the health are independent, so to say. And it's not circular because this is cross-sectional and it's not over time. And much of the relationship between work and health is bidirectional, and some instantaneous, some is delayed, and it depends very much on the variations between the individuals. What's interesting from these graphs, this is, if you put this index in decide each of them, that's there. This is the level of well-being. It's between 0 and 100. So the highest, and that's well-being measured by WHO 5. So the highest, the highest level of well-being. And this is a viability within the decile. So what we see here, which is quite interesting, is that if you want to improve the well-being of workers, if you want to assess the relationship between job quality and well-being of workers, the two most important, part of the index are intrinsic job quality and then the more the prospects index. This is the third, and working time is the lowest one. And when you have low level of job quality, the variation in well-being is highest. Not here. So here I think it shows that a lot of it depends on the individual, on the labor market, and the institutions around it, for them to cope. Whereas once you have a really higher level of job quality, then the effects are more. The size of the effect is.
I don't understand that, the diagram. So what are the bars?
Here you have the earnings index, and we've put it in deciles.
Yeah.
And the measure between 0 and 1. And here you have the level of the WHO. So what is the subjective well-being of individuals per decile of the earnings index?
Okay, and then the red line?
And the red line is the variation. What is the variation on the level of well-being within this decile?
So, standard deviation or something?
It's how much, people who are in the first decile of the earning index, the variation between the lowest and the biggest, what do you say? Le rapport, the difference is 0.39. So there is more variation in people reporting a level of well-being than here. It's a proportion. Is it? Okay. So, so what is, I think is interesting is to show that this earnings matter, all of these matter. But, and that's probably where I'm coming from, what has to do with the work, matter. And there are ways that we can add well-being, which, have not to do with the earnings, not that they don't matter. And then I've realized when I was checking my slides, I've forgotten to give you one, because we've done some work over time. And what we've seen is that over time, this one is the one which has increased the most, the working time quality. And indeed, we've had quite a lot of policies, to, for example, the directive on long hours and blah, blah, blah. So this one I've changed. This one I've changed very little. So I should have given you that. Then, this part was about, there's a worker, and what is their job, and what is the quality of their job, and to what extent does it matter. This is, and I realize I should probably not have given you this, because this is an example of a bad question, and which we've got rid of. But it's a bad question which is working well, which is, even more embarrassing. So it's a bad question because it's a double barrel, so you should never ask a question like this, because you'd never know at the end, are people answering to this or to that. So that's, but that's a question that we've had for a long time, and which have been used in other surveys as a very good predictor of labor market exit and, retirement intention. What has been learned about this question over time is that for younger workers, it's something to do with job satisfaction. And for older workers, it's something to do with really what is going to be happening, so labor market behavior. And, what we see is that, for, I think on average in Europe, it's something like nearly 60% of workers say, yes, I think I'm going to be able to do my work till I'm 60. I wouldn't want, and I'm not able. But what is interesting is, this is descriptive, but behind, when we did all the loggage, it was working quite well. So what we did is try to look at the factors that would be associated or predict a high level of job sustainability, which is an important discussion in Europe. And of course, okay, the factors which is the highest predictor of a job sustainability is not being bullied. That's something which is and not having violence. And that's something which is very, very important, is that in companies, a lot of the policies around bullying, they don't cost much money. They cost a bit of some talk and some good practice, good management, but that's, you can implement these policies even if you don't have much money, and they're working very well. But what we were trying to do is to make the link between the individual and the job quality, and the individual and some of their individual properties. And we end up with the same type of things, which is if you have a high level of autonomy, if you have low work intensity, if you have workers' participation, formal or informal, if this is a very French one. In France, we're only discussing about this at the moment. For the French literature at the moment on work, all the issues around work well done, and it seems that for a French perspective, that's the most important determinant for health and labor market behavior. If people are able to do their work well, everything goes well. If they are not, it all collapses. And that's what we're discussing at the moment in France, only on conditions that allow people to do their work well.
These averages?
Pardon?
What are these numbers? Are these averages on that 100-point scale? Gender?
They're just percentage of people who say, I'm never able to do work well done, or I'm always able. Well, we've dichotomized, actually, because it was a 5, and I don't remember which was the cutoff. So when, people who say they have a job sustainability, and they never, and always. Yeah. Having a job which has ergonomic risk, that posture-related risk, that's not good. Having high career development possibilities, that's good. A good work-life balance, learning new things. So what's interesting is to look at when you have an objective approach to job quality, you identified factors which matter, and they work, but when you try to put the individual into it, there are other things that count, and that's the work-life balance. And so the question is, to some extent, it validates the job quality approach, so an external objective things, but it also shows that there are some other things which are missing. And now that's the things that we need, I believe, to find, and there's what I call for the moment job quality plus. What are those things that really matter, so that we can hopefully design policy or promote good practice on this. So I think it's really, from a policy perspective, it shows job quality matter very much, and remains a central piece of what we need to do. But there are determinants, and there's a lot of, dual-sided relationship. And we cannot completely isolate it from these determinants. And we also need to, find ways to understand how they're working, influencing, and all of that. So what does that say? That it's possible to put a number, that number is hard. It's hard to get a good quality number, and that number is not that easy to interpret. It shows that, looking only at employment is not enough, and if we want to understand or to contribute to our policy objectives in terms of labor market participation, we need to look to some extent at work, how are people managed, how is work organized, and there is, again, a link between labor market, social policies, and economic things. And we cannot just have a debate on the macro things and forget the micro things. That is important. This is something which I believe Red showed you last time, so I didn't really. But we were trying to, I didn't this time, but we were trying to make life stages things, so try to separate between men and women and, their kind of family responsibilities, their age, and all of that. And we can see how, the job quality varies according to this, and, how it's, the trade-offs are different. For example, the price of part-time is a huge price, and it doesn't make much sense from, many perspectives to work part-time, economic perspective. But if we want to increase the participation rate, if we want to increase, economical progress or whatever, we need to look at how people are, able to combine work and family, in different ways, and to integrate the fact that women and men are not doing the same job at all, and, have a different role at home. So it's very important to look at this. This clearly, when we wrote, well, I didn't, but many people wrote, many years ago that with progress things would go super well, or with, probably deregulation things would go super bad or super well. Actually, there's nothing automatic. And if we do want to improve working conditions, which is in the Treaty of the European Union, we will not manage naturally, and that's something that requires, a lot of efforts from public policy, but also from social partners, company, and ourselves, in our daily work. We also have to contribute to that and, play the role that is needed. If you look at trends at the moment, I'm not sure we're all going where we want to go according to the policy agenda. So the question is, what will we do, or will we do anything at all to try to address this? And this is something which, it's not that nothing costs money, but some of the action that can be done, they don't cost money. So, saying there's a crisis, we will postpone, I don't think that's an argument. There are many studies that show that quantity and quality of employment, they go together, they're well correlated, there's hundreds of those studies. So it's not because there's a crisis that we need necessarily to lower, the working conditions, the job quality of people. So, things can go well together. We do have a lot of concern in Europe about the aging challenge and the fact that the workforce is aging. There'll be less younger workers, and a lot of the younger workers anyway are not, they're not workers. They're not employed, and by good working conditions, we can help meet this challenge, first by giving older workers working conditions which are in line with their abilities, but also by making sure that the future generations don't get their health affected. So that's not the only solution, but that's one thing. We know that according to the way work is organized, people can develop their capacities and and the human capital, and that's very important to look at how in the job design and the HRM policies we do allow in practice for people to grow on their jobs, to grow into other jobs, and we need much more of this. I'm a researcher, so I want more data. But I think the issues are sufficiently serious and complicated for having a whole series of data surveys that we can contrast. You were talking about company data, and I think that's very important, not to rely only on one type of methodology, but to build on different tools and try to develop good quality tools, so that we can monitor what is happening and understand. And interdisciplinary, I think that's very important. The issues of work, so many people are involved into them and have different theories that, that's something which we need to look at. And data usage, that's a dimension of quality. Thank you.